Greetings, people of the web. Jake here. So this video is going to be actually quite a bit different from what I usually do here on the channel. But um, I've mentioned before in some of my more recent videos that one of my all-time favorite things to do is travel. Whether it be domestic or international, although I tend to lean more towards international because I've been to more countries than I have states, which, depending on how you look at it, is either sad or cool. But anywho, so I was kind of thinking just to change things up and try something new. I would kind of run down my list of countries that I've been to, and in chronological order of the first one that I visited down to the most recent one. Kind of give my general thoughts on the different countries and share my experience, and hopefully, for those of you who are avid travelers or looking to travel for the first time, maybe give some good suggestions on some of these different countries. And if you've been to these countries, let me know what you thought of them. So, anywho, so I guess a little bit of context. So the first, I think it's the first five. Yeah, so the first five countries on my list, I did the same summer of 2006. So I was 15 at the time, and this is the first time I ever went international. I was with the People to People Student Ambassador Program, which I don't think is still a thing now, but anyways, so basically it was a 3-week trip and a really cool experience, and it's kind of a shame that that program isn't still around because it was great. But anywho, so I guess to add a little bit of context of like, I guess how I got to travel. But basically, so the first five countries that pop up was all on the same trip. It was a 3-week trip, and it was definitely a lot more because I was basically going with a bunch of other kids my age, so like early teenagers, kind of traveling the world. And the whole point of the People to People Student Ambassador Program is to travel, across the world and kind of just bring a good name to, the U.S. and just establish relationships and stuff like that. And it really was a very rewarding experience for me. And it was definitely a lot more. I think for my first time being international, it was obviously very like structured, and obviously since we were a bunch of teenagers, they're chaperones. So I definitely would not travel this way in the future because it's just not necessarily the way I like to travel. But anywho, before I continue to ramble, start with the list. So the first country that we went to back in the summer of 2006 was Malta, which I imagine most people have never heard of and could let alone point out on the map. Now, granted, it is a little hard to point out on the map because it's tiny. Like, if you do see it on the map, you probably won't see actual landmass. You'll just see, Valletta, which is the capital, which is where we flew into. Now, so Valletta is a tiny island archipelago nation in the Mediterranean Sea. It's a very interesting country because, one, it's tiny, but it's also the only European country that speaks a Semitic language. So Semitic related to Hebrew, Arabic, Aramaic, and so it's got for a tiny country, it packs above its weight in terms of like its history. And I'll try to not go into a whole lot of detail on like some of the stuff because then it'll turn into a whole like lengthy video. And as much as I love history, I want to try and like run through this relatively quickly. But overall, my experience in Malta was quite pleasant because prior to learning I'd be going to that country, I had never heard of it, knew nothing about it. But it was really cool because there's a lot of history that dates back. I mean, super far back. But I guess some of the highlights like the Phoenicians, Greeks, Romans, Italians, Arabs, and that's kind of why it has like this wide blend of different like cultures. And it was also a British colony at one point, so a lot, most of the population does speak English and speaks English fluently. But it's such a cool country because it is such this like hodgepodge of different cultures all blended in together. The only thing, and also another thing that's really cool about Malta is so not only the history, like we took like towards some of the museums and stuff like that. It was also like an important site for like during the Crusades, And the waters surrounding Malta are some of the most blue, like beautiful blue waters I've ever seen. And one of the few times, part of that trip, we actually got to go to one of their famous beaches, the Blue Lagoon. So that was really cool. My only complaint, and this is not anything with like the culture or anything like that, is it is super hot, because it is. I think it's actually geographically closer to continental Africa than it is Europe. So it's super hot, and we went there in June. So like peak summer, 90 degrees, and even the locals who have lived there their entire lives were kind of like, yeah, no, we don't even get used to this heat. So that was really my only, I guess, complaint with that country is for a pasty pale ginger like myself, who does not go well with the heat and sun. I was struggling a little bit there, but other than that, really cool country. And again, definitely a place I would recommend, because one, it's tiny, so you can. It's a little out there. Because I remember when we flew there, we flew into Heathrow Airport in London, then from London to Valletta, Malta, and so yeah, it's really cool. Because again, the blend different cultures, and everyone was super nice. Like I remember at one point we stayed at with a local family, and they kind of just let us walk around, like kind of walk around the block, and yeah, locals were just super friendly. And yeah, Malta was pretty cool. Very very unexpected, pleasant surprise for me. So the next country we went to is after we were leaving Malta, we took a ferry to Sicily and spent about 2 or 3 days there, and then we went to mainland Italy. So personally, the places that I went to in Italy, mainland Italy, I think I preferred Sicily more, mostly just because of, again, that time of year. I think I preferred like the climate a little bit more in Sicily because we were it's a bit more mountainous. It's like we got to go to Mount Etna and Pompeii. Or no, Pompeii is I think in mainland Italy. Anywho, but I think I preferred Sicily a little bit more. But that being said, pretty much regardless of where you go in mainland Italy, you're gonna have a good time because there's so much history. Because Rome in itself is basically a museum. Like anywhere you walk, you're gonna come across like ancient Roman like architecture, ruins, and someone like myself who is a big history fan. In particular, I love kind of like Greco-Roman history. It's one of my favorite parts of history. So I was just having the time of my life, getting to go to the Colosseum, getting to see the Roman Forum, and a lot of the other like highlights that you'd see in Rome. And needless to say, the food is just incredible because you've really never had pasta until you've had pasta in Italy, because that's what they're famous for. So yeah, food to die for. Again, the Italians also super friendly, which for me that really makes my experience in a different country that much more enjoyable. Is if the people are very friendly, very welcoming, and yeah, don't really have anything nicer to say about Italy and the Italians as a people. Again, it was a little hot, but that's kind of be expected. And in all the countries, by the way, that I'm listing, I would gladly go back to. There are some things I would definitely do differently, because again, mostly when I travel, I like to do more outdoorsy stuff. So I would say, if I made a return to like Italy, for example, I don't know. Like a part of me would be tempted to go back to like the see some of the sites in like in like the Colosseum and stuff like that. But the other part of me would probably just want to fly into Rome and then go to the countryside. Because again, Italy is just gorgeous. Pretty much no matter what part you're at, whether you're in the south of Italy, the north of Italy, it's all great. And also getting to see like Pisa. And again, this was so long ago that I don't remember all the cities we hit up, but I remember we hit up most of the kind of well-known cities, like kind of Renaissance, like that were really big in the Renaissance era. Yeah, Italy was great, and again, I would love to go back just for the food in itself. I would love, but I do recall not spending a whole lot of time in the north of Italy. And I think that's probably, if I do ever go back, which I very much would like to, I think I would like to spend a bit more time in the north of Italy, mostly like kind of in this Italian Alps section. Just because, again, I love the mountains, I love hiking, so that's probably what I would do. And also, since at the time, I think we could or at least I could, because I was the oldest one in the group at 15. I think I technically could have drank in some of the bars and stuff like, or not bars, but restaurants we went to with adult supervision. But obviously we went with chaperones, so that was a big no-no. But I would like to go to Italy and actually go on like tour some of the vineyards, because even though I'm definitely more of a beer person, I mean, yeah, again, if you're in Italy, yeah, try some of the wines. But I also would like to try some of Italian beers, because I don't think I've ever had an Italian beer before. So Italy is definitely one of my favorite countries. So then after Italy, we took a bus. I can't remember from what city it was. I know it was somewhere in northern Italy. I just don't recall the exact city. But then we drove through the mountains into Monaco, which is a microstate. So Europe's got a ton of microstates. Actually, no. Sorry, before Monaco, we went to the Vatican City, which is actually the world's smallest country. And honestly, probably one of my least favorite places. Because don't get me wrong, the Vatican is really cool. Because, again, tiny country, but a lot of history there. Because, that's the Pope lives. Lots of cool architecture. And the entire city's, like, walled off. So I remember waiting in line for probably 2-3 hours, something like that, just to get into the Vatican City. And obviously we walked around and got to see some of the sights. So as far as like architecture and stuff like that and just historical significance, it was really cool. But it's probably my least favorite in the sense that that's really all that there's there to do, because it basically is just a city. Like I think there's only like 800 permanent residents in the Vatican, and so I guess unless you're just like a super devout Catholic, honestly, you could probably skip the Vatican and you'd be fine. Because, again, super long lines, and then once you do get in there, it's basically you're just kind of walking around looking at all the sights, which, again, aren't really cool. But, I don't know, I guess in a way it's not quite worth the long time you have to wait in line just to walk around a little city. And so, probably my least favorite countries that I've ever been to, just purely for the fact that there's just not a lot to do other than just tour it. Like you're literally walking around and taking pictures and stuff like that. So, anyways, back to Monaco. So, Monaco is the fourth country we went to, a microstate. And we only spent, so similar to the Vatican, we kind of just stopped by there. So, on our way to France. Because Monaco is kind of like close to the Italian border. And kind of similar. It is really cool. It's a pretty city, but there's not a whole lot to do because it is so small, and it's also well known for like being a place for rich people. So if you're really rich, then yeah, you probably love it because you can park your yacht there, you can go gambling, and I think the Grand Prix, some kind of like race takes place in Monaco that's really famous and popular. But yeah, other than that, there's not a whole lot to do there. So it was kind of one of those places where I don't regret going there because it's just another country to add to my list, and I had a pleasant time. I just and maybe it's because we didn't spend a whole lot of time there. Like it was maybe like 4 hours or so that we spent in Monaco, so it didn't really do a whole lot. But yeah, for that reason though, again, probably one of the least favorite countries. Again, not to say it's bad by any stretch. It's just not. Honestly, don't know if I would go back to Monaco, just because there's not a whole lot that country offers that I like to do. Because again, I prefer like outdoorsy stuff, and the whole country's basically a city, so not really any outdoorsy stuff to do there. So after Monaco, we then drove into France, and so overall, France is a very beautiful country, and like I'm gonna say about all these countries, like jam packed with history. and got to see like a lot of the highlights. Like got to go to Versailles, got to go to Paris. I forget some of the other cities we went to. We did get to see like Notre Dame. Got to go inside the Louvre. Louvre, I think is the actual French pronunciation. It's been a while since I've used my French. But anywho, so France overall I did enjoy. And it's a country that I'd definitely like to go back and probably spend more time in some of the smaller towns and villages because I of all the major cities that I've been to, both domestic and international, Paris is easily my least favorite. And it has a bad reputation, and for good reason. In my opinion, it's kind of dirty. The people were not very friendly at all. Like, at best, they seemed indifferent. And so yeah, Paris overall, like, yeah, it was cool getting to see some of the sights. Like we got to go into to the top of the Eiffel Tower, which was cool. Got to go inside the Louvre and see like some of the famous paintings like Mona Lisa. But I'm not super big into art, so even though it was cool, it's not something that I don't know. It maybe like had I not been with that group, it's probably not something that I would have necessarily done in France. So again, it's cool that I got to go inside the Louvre, see all sorts of cool like paintings and sculptures and all that. But someone who's just not really big into art, yeah. And again, like honestly, the Mona Lisa, it's once you've seen it in like a movie or you've seen a picture in a book or something like that, it's that just bigger. That's about it. And you can't even take pictures either, for good reason, because if you take pictures of like the some of the paintings and stuff like that, it can degrade over time. So obviously you don't want these paintings to degrade and eventually cease to exist. So for good reason you can't take pictures of them. But I guess if you're one of those people that loves to take pictures of like literally everything you do when you travel, which not me, but if that's what you like to do, totally fine. Not a lot of photo opportunities at the Louvre. Although I do remember at the Louvre they have like a food court that has like this huge international, like all these different like restaurants, and a lot of them are international. So that was kind of cool because I'm a food person. And another reason why I'd like to go to like return to Italy and also France is just I'd be down just doing like a culinary tour. So yeah, Paris, least favorite big city in the world. Would not really recommend it. I mean, obviously, if you're flying into France, it's probably inevitable that you're gonna fly into Paris. But I would immediately leave Paris once you get there and go south. Like I would like to visit Normandy, Brittany, and more south of France because I remember we spent some time in the south, but I don't remember all that well because again, this was I was 15, so 18 years ago. So almost 20 years ago that I was in some of these countries. So some of it I don't remember as well. But I do know some of the French people that I've talked to during my other travels from the south of France were all like super nice people, and that's kind of what made me want to go back to France. Is when I talked to them, they would always ask me like if I'd been to France, and what I thought about it, and kind of told them the same thing that like France I overall enjoyed, didn't like Paris, and pretty much all of them kind of agree. They're like, yeah, we don't even like Parisians. They're a bunch of dicks. Come to the south of France, come to like Lyon and some of the other cities in south of France. They're like, people are a lot nicer. You'll have a better time. So that's something I would like to do. Is go to like again spend more time in like the smaller towns and cities. Because to me that's also where you get the more authentic experience of what the people and culture are like in the smaller towns and cities. So, after France, which that concluded my first international trip, and that's what really opened my eyes to like other cultures and really wanting to travel more. So again, experience like the different cultures, different foods, different scenery and all that stuff. So it'd be quite a while before I traveled again. Not until I was an adult and had like a job and could actually afford to travel. So fast forward to when I was 22. I went to Ireland and basically did a road trip around the entire country. So, as you can tell by my pasty pale exterior and ginger hair, um, I'm Swedish. No, I'm Irish. So that that was a great experience for me because just that whole trip as a whole was magical. It sounds kind of lame and cliche to say that like Ireland was magical, but it was. It was like two of the best weeks of my life. So we flew into Dublin, spent a couple days there, hit up the Guinness distillery or Guinness brewery, which was great, especially because I was a fan of Guinness before, but getting to have Guinness not only in Ireland but also at the Guinness brewery was I've never had a better Guinness in my life, and also a really cool brewery. Like they even had like a cool restaurant, like on the grounds, and then there's also a bar. I think it's called the Sky Bar, where it's basically like this whole glass room, essentially, kind of like at the top of the brewery, where you get a really nice view of like downtown Dublin. I remember we went up there, but we didn't spend a whole lot of time because it was really crowded. Because understandably, it's yeah, you have this great view of downtown Dublin, so that's where most people go after they finish their tour. So we actually went to one of the restaurants that they had on site and had a delicious beef and Guinness stew with a pint of Guinness. Um, so yeah, that was day one. Day two is when we hit up the Jameson distillery, and that was a lot of fun because I'm definitely more of a beer person, but I do like whiskeys and bourbons, and just I do like learning the process of like beer making and whiskey, bourbon, all that stuff. Um, so that was really cool. However, so after I think it was day three. So we were heading south, driving through the Wicklow Mountains, which are beautiful, by the way. And so as we were driving through the mountains, we kind of stumble across like this beautiful little area you can kind of pull off to the side of, and there's like a little lake. I don't know the name of the lake. It's around the Glendalough area. So for those of you who are familiar with Ireland, or those of you who are Irish, you may know what I'm talking about. Because again, I just know the rough area. It's in the Wicklow Mountains and near Glendalough, somewhere in that area. Um, there's just like this beautiful pristine lake and this little hiking trail that led down there. So great day. Like we kind of just on a whim, we're like, oh hey, let's see if we can walk down to that lake. So it turns out you could. So we probably spent a good like hour and a half, like there taking pictures, and we were some of the only ones there outside of a local couple, their dog, and then there's like a family and their two kids. Other than that, it was just me and my older sister. And so talked to the locals, and was actually surprised that it wasn't as busy with people. But like the locals were even kind of like, yeah, you guys are lucky. Like most people actually go to like one of the other lakes that was a little down the road, and I guess that particular lake wasn't as well known. But yeah, super friendly people. However, on our way back to where we parked the car, someone had broken into our rental car. So, understandably, we were a little worried, because one of the worst things that could happen whenever you're traveling happened. However, what was really cool is, some locals, we were kind of talking to them. They could obviously tell we were very upset, because everything got stolen except for it's like our passports, our backpacks. The only thing that didn't get stolen was, thankfully, I had my phone, my wallet, and then my iPod on me, which I'm a big music person, so that was very important for me to still have my iPod. But like our passports were stolen, like all of our luggage. So that was, again, we were very distraught. But thankfully, like we were calmed down very quickly because some locals, once we kind of told them what happened, they were very everyone in Ireland we came across were absurdly friendly, which one of the reasons why I love Ireland so much. Not just being biased here because I'm Irish, but again, everyone we came across was just absurdly friendly. But some of the locals we kind of flagged down. They're like biking for charity, I think, And so they were even giving us like some of their extra like snacks and waters and stuff like that, and kind of just like asking us like what our itinerary was, giving us recommendations on like places to visit. Um, so that helped us kind of like calm down a little bit more. So we ended up driving back to Dublin to get a new rental car because thankfully we had gotten insurance on our car, so we could just it was an easy swap out. But then we were still kind of a little bummed because we like I don't know if we were just doing things wrong, but like the when we were looking up like the whole embassy thing and like how that would work to get like new passports or just how that would work out. I remember the embassy had terrible hours, and so that just added more anxiety. But I kind of rationalized that it's like okay, worst case scenario, we maybe end up having to spend a few extra days in Ireland to get all this sorted out, like all the paperwork that we can return home. Not a huge deal, because you know we were having a fun time outside of that incident. But fast forward, so thankfully someone had stumbled across their luggage because one of the locals had actually told us that people go to that area intentionally and like rob like tourists, but they're mostly just looking for like valuables. So like again, people's wallets or electronics like laptops, phones, iPods, stuff like that they can sell, and then anything else they just kind of like toss on the side of the road. So thankfully, some kind soul discovered our luggage on the side of the road and brought them to Wexford. So I remember at one point we were at, honestly, yeah, okay, yes. So we tried to make the best of it. We got like some new clothes and stuff like that, new backpacks, and had a great trip. Like Ireland it's such a beautiful country. Like once we kind of reconvened, drove from Dublin to Waterford, met up with a friend, hung out with them in Waterford for a little bit. And then from Waterford, we did the Ring of Kerry, which would definitely recommend doing that because it's a beautiful drive, like all around the coast. But I remember we were staying the night at this tiny little fishing village called Portmagee. Population of only about like 200 people. Love that little village. There's not a lot going on there because tiny population. I remember there was a hostel, which is where we stayed at, looked brand new. And I imagine they probably built that for tourists doing the Ring of Kerry. But Portmagee was one of my favorite places in Ireland just because it's this tiny little village right on the coast. And I don't know, I just imagine like prior to people knowing that there's an entire continent west of Ireland, people who first settled there probably like this is the end of the earth. This is as far as we go. But yeah, just beautiful place, and the Fisherman Bar is this nice little pub right there, like on the waterfront. So I remember like having a couple pints, having like some bar food, like I think it was just like some fries, maybe fish and chips. But I remember that's when we got the call that someone had found our stuff. So then the next day we drove to Wexford, went to the Garda station that our stuff was dropped off at, picked up, and then of course we were like yes, all is right with the world, and thankfully we still had our passports because that was in our backpacks, and again they didn't bother taking that stuff. So yeah, looking back now is terrified as we were at the time. I think it just adds to the story and makes it more fun to tell. But another thing I would recommend with Ireland in Dublin, outside of the Jameson Distillery, Guinness Brewery, Phoenix Park. I remember we went to Phoenix Park after our experience at Guinness, and beautiful park. Like it was such a nice day. We almost like fell asleep in the park. And Trinity College was really cool. So other things I would recommend. If you're in Waterford, I would recommend Reginald's Tower. So it's this old Norman fort. I forget what year it was built in. This probably would have been like 1300s. I should know this because I'm a history fan. But anyways, so it's this old Norman fort. There's not a whole lot left of it, but what is left is just, I thought it was really cool. One of the highlights of Waterford. Then I remember from Portmagee, we stumbled upon this little town called Lynch. as we were heading to the Cliffs of Moher. And funny enough, that was actually like we stumbled across it by accident. It was one of the places that the biker guys had recommended us to, in this really nice restaurant called Joe's Cafe, which is really close to the beachfront. So really nice restaurant, nice little town. Like I remember we walked around on the beach, and not a whole lot of people out there because it's kind of a cloudy day, which for me is the best kind of day because I don't have to worry about sunblock. I also did manage to get sunburned in Ireland, which was like the one country in the world where I'm like, I'm fine. It's like rainy and cloudy 90% of the time. But that hike we took to that lake in 70-degree weather got sunburned. So just to show how pale I am, and there is no hope for me. But outside of that little tangent, so after that we went to Cliffs of Moher, which is definitely another highlight of Ireland. In my opinion, I think that's a must. If you're gonna visit Ireland, definitely take the trip to the west of Ireland to the Cliffs of Moher because it's beautiful. You can do a little bit of hiking like around the cliffs, but even if you just go to like the main part with like O'Brien's Castle, and you're just staring off into the Atlantic Ocean, it's incredible. And so then I remember from the Cliffs of Moher, we went to Galway. Actually, no, I think before we went to Galway, we went to the Aran Islands. So the Aran Islands are these tiny, three little islands off the mainland. Inishmore, I think, is the largest island, which is the one we went to. So we only did like a little day, not even a full day trip. But I remember like we rode bikes, because that's one of the things you can do there is you can rent bikes and just kind of like bike around the island. So that was really cool. I'd definitely like to go back and maybe spend more time on Inishmore, maybe check out the other Aran Islands. But after that, we went to Galway, which I really love Galway. It's probably one of my favorite cities, not just in Ireland, but in general. And I'd definitely like to spend more time there because it's a very lively musical city. Like I remember that night we were kind of just like walking around like one of these like cobblestone streets, and coming out of I forget where we were at, maybe coming out of a bar, but there was a like rockabilly band playing in like one of the back alleys. There's so a lot of like bands just playing out in the streets and performers. And I remember that was also the first time that I had haggis. So it's deep fried haggis at like some little like hole in the wall restaurant that we ate at before we went drinking. So that was delicious. Would definitely recommend haggis to anyone who's never tried it. If you're going to Ireland or going to Scotland and are considering it, add that to your bucket list. Try haggis, whether it be deep fried, because there's a lot of different ways it's prepared. You can't go wrong. Haggis is delicious, in my opinion. But yeah, Galway was great. And then from Galway, we kind of drove through some of the northern counties on our way to Northern Ireland, which is its own separate country, still part of the UK. So that's actually where my family has a lot of our roots, is Northern Ireland. And it really isn't a whole lot different, because obviously it's part of the island of Ireland. The biggest difference is they're predominantly Protestant, whereas the Republic of Ireland is predominantly Catholic. But their accents. So the accents, I really like the Northern Irish accent. It's close. Actually, I'd say, so Scottish accent's closer to Northern Irish, the Ulster accent, because the Scots originally come from Northern Ireland. But digressing, love Northern Ireland. Belfast is probably also one of my favorite cities. It's very clean. And I remember there was a restaurant called Dean's Deli. I think it's since closed, which I'm really bummed about because that place was incredible. And just some of the sites, like the Giant's Causeway, that is a must. I feel like if you're going to Ireland, take the extra day or whatever, go north, go to the Giant's Causeway. It's beautiful. Carrick-a-Reid Bridge is really cool, and I think that's only about like maybe a 20-30 minute drive down the road from Giant's Causeway. And I just remember Northern Ireland, again, incredible. The people are just as friendly there as they are in the Republic of Ireland. I do love the Irish sense of humor. Again, maybe just personal bias here. But one thing that if you've never been, is the Irish people have, sometimes it can be a bit of a dark sense of humor, but pretty much everyone's a comedian. If they're kind of poking fun of you, it's not out of like any malicious intent. They're just having fun. They're just taking the piss out of you. And that's one thing that I love so much about Ireland, the Irish people, is they're very warm and welcoming. And once you get to know them, they're going to be like making fun of you again in a very, you know, fun, loving way. Again, they're not trying to do it to just be like assholes. They're just doing it because that's just their sense of humor. So if they're making fun of you, they're giving you shit. Don't take offense. They're just having fun, and that probably just means that they like you. So that's one thing that I do really miss about Ireland is their sense of humor, and again, the fact that everyone is just really funny without even really trying to be. Another thing too that I love about traveling is just experiencing like how similar people are, and also how the differences too in sense of humor, culture, customs, and mannerisms and stuff like that. But yeah, so overall, Ireland, and also kind of include Northern Ireland too, even though it's its own separate country. But as a whole, one of the best places I've ever been, and would love to go back. So after Northern Ireland, the following year, me, my oldest sister, my older brother, went on a UK road trip. So flew into London and spent a couple days there, which was really cool. Because even though I don't love the big cities, because to me most of the big cities are kind of the same. I mean, yeah, they have their own like significant like architecture and stuff like that, and specific sites that you can only see in certain cities. But overall, they feel very similar. But all that to say, I did like London. Like we did like the Eye of London, which is like this big like Ferris wheel where you get a really good view of like Parliament and that kind of general area of downtown London, and did like the Harry Potter tour. So got to see like some of the sets and some of the props and stuff like that from the movies, which was really cool. And I remember I think it was our first full night in London. Because usually the way we travel is at the end of the night, we like to go to like the nearest pub and just have a couple drinks, maybe have dinner, just to kind of like cap our day off. So we went to like this pub, and as we were leaving, about to pay our tab, this very drunk English guy, very well dressed by the way, notices, kind of just, we start talking. Once we tell him that we live in Kentucky, he's just hit the expression in his face completely changed, because apparently this man loved KFC and bourbon, and just kept going about how much he loved KFC. He said he would even kill for KFC. Very, very fun guy. But he also, in his drunken stupor, bought us a round of scotch. Or no, sorry, not scotch. It was Bushmills Irish, Northern Irish whiskey, which is probably my favorite whiskey. Because apparently he went on this whole thing on Irish whiskey versus bourbon versus scotch, and why he doesn't like scotch, which I do agree with him. Not a fan. But yeah, so that was really fun, and kind of made that night a lot more interesting. And also he was fun to talk to. He probably doesn't remember anything about that night because that man was gone mentally. But yeah, that was fun. And then after that, we went to hit up some other like big sites like Salisbury, where we saw Stonehenge. Because to me, that's a must. That's just such a cool site. And yeah, like, how can you not go see Stonehenge? So even though I usually try to avoid the more touristy stuff whenever I travel, there are some things where I'm like, I gotta go see it. And Stonehenge, I think, is definitely one of those sites where it's like, yeah, go see it. Bath is a really cool little city. It's a UNESCO heritage site, built around these old Roman baths, hence the name Bath. We didn't actually go to the Roman baths, but Bath in of itself was just a cool city. Then I remember we actually don't. I wish we could have spent more time in like the Midlands and like south of England, like in Cornwall and stuff like that. But I remember pretty much from there we went to Wales, which Wales is another one of those countries that I think, as small as it is, like I think it's got a population of like 3.2 million, something like that, 3.3. So not even 3.5 million. But for a country as tiny as it is, it's got a lot. You've got the mountains, you've got the coast. The Welsh people are super friendly. I remember having the national beer. I can't remember the name of it, but I really liked it. Also, Wales has one of the coolest flags. It's got a dragon on it. Can't get any cooler than a dragon. And tons of castles. Like I remember we hiked around Manorbyre Castle one of the days we were in Wales. So even though it's a small country, I definitely would love to go back and spend more time there because we were primarily in. Oh, I know. I can't remember the town we stayed in. Swansea, I think, was one of the cities we were in. But we were in the Manorbyre region primarily. We only passed through Cardiff. I can't remember the restaurant we ate at, but when we passed through Cardiff, that was on my birthday. So remember, my siblings took me out to eat for my birthday. So that was really nice. I ate at like this nice little restaurant right there on the coast. So I had a nice seaside view. And again, Wales is just, for such a small country, it's beautiful. And tons of sheep. Like, it's got so many sheep. More sheep than people. But yeah, Wales I loved, and I imagine I could go back to Wales in of itself and just spend like a whole 2 weeks there and still, travel like up and down the country and still not see everything. So yeah, Wales is definitely a country I would highly recommend. And I really wish we had spent more time there, but we were kind of like, Wales is a small country. We can probably see most of it in 2 days. And we definitely hit up some of the highlights, but 2 days was definitely not enough. So definitely love to go back to Wales. And then I remember we flew into Northern Ireland because we wanted to take my older brother to go see the Giant's Causeway, Corky Reed Bridge, and again, that's where like a lot of our family are from. So only spent like one full day in Northern Ireland before we flew back to. Where did we fly into? Anyways, doesn't really matter. But then after we flew back into England, we headed north to Scotland. And I remember on our way north, we stopped at Hadrian's Wall, which that to me was one of the that was great because it's this old Roman wall and fortress that was basically built along the line of not quite Scotland and England, but at the time, that's basically what separated like Roman-controlled England from the frontier. So like the Scottish tribes, what they considered, that's what stopped, or the separation between like the frontier and civilization, basically. So getting to see the remnants of Hadrian's Wall, getting to like walk across it was just super cool. Definitely one of the highlights of that trip, and just that part of northern England was just super beautiful. But there's also places in northern England that I would have liked to have visited, like York, and tons of other places that we really either didn't spend a whole lot of time in or completely bypassed because we were kind of short on time and tried to see as much as we could in the like 3 weeks we were there. Excuse me. But yeah, so overall England was great, and then went into Scotland, and Edinburgh might be also up there with one of my favorite cities. I love the architecture, especially when you're the older part of the city, like not so much in the suburbs. Just it really is like this almost fairy tale magical city, and like bagpipers on almost every street corner, which is really cool. Like basically when we were there, and I imagine this is how it is pretty much anytime you're in Edinburgh, is pretty much wherever you're at in Edinburgh, you're gonna hear a bagpiper. And I remember I met a really cool dude who was in a band. So I bought his album. Spinning Blowfish was the name of his band. But he was a bagpiper in that band. So that was really cool, just kind of chatting with him, checking out his band. And because that's another thing that I like too about when I travel is checking out like some of those street musicians. Because some of them actually do have like albums. They've got their own stuff like on Spotify, Apple, iTunes, and all that stuff. So I do like to check out local bands and try and support them. Then also in Scotland, had haggis several more times, several different ways. Love it every single time. One of my favorite foods. And again, the history there is just super rich, and the Scottish people are great. Um, Sort of similar to Irish and British with like that sense of humor, kind of dry, but also they'll kind of make fun of you just as much as the Irish do. Um, and I remember after Edinburgh, which I probably one of the few big cities that I would have liked to have spent more time in. But I think we were only there for like one full day before we headed north up into the Highlands. And remember, we also stopped in Stirling and got to see like I think it's like a William Wallace like this tower in Stirling that I think it was like dedicated to William Wallace. So that was cool. But the Highlands I think was definitely one of my favorite parts because it's a bit more rural and just mountainous and rugged, gorgeous. So Inverness is the capital of the Highlands, and it's really the only large city in the Highlands area. And we also stopped by Glasgow, which I like Glasgow well enough, but not as much as Edinburgh. But anyways, Inverness though I really liked. It has a lot of charm to it, and it's not super big to where it's like incredibly overwhelming like whenever you're there like other larger cities. Um, but that's where we stayed. It kind of uses our base of operations when we were traveling in the Highlands. And obviously, if you go to Scotland, you gotta go to Loch Ness. Whether it's because you're trying to look for Loch Ness monster or you just want to go because it's beautiful, which it is. Um, like we took a little boat ride on there that happened to also be part of like a Loch Ness tour, like not just driving around the Loch Ness itself, but trying to find Nessie, which you know surprise, surprise, did not find Nessie. But it was a beautiful, beautiful experience. And I really feel like if there was going to be a day that Nessie would show up, it would have been that day because it had been raining kind of on and off that day. So like it was actually really cool as we were riding that boat on the lake, and like mist was kind of just drifting down from the mountains onto the lake. So it's like that would have been a perfect time to see like a silhouette of like Nessie popping its head out of the lake. And then of course we went to a Highland festival in Aberdeen. Aberdeen's a nice little city too, right there on the coast. So overall, I think my favorite part of Scotland was definitely up in the Highlands area, and I think if I went back to Scotland, that's probably where I'd spend most of my time. Is probably spend a couple, maybe 2 or 3 days in Edinburgh in that general area, and then head straight to Inverness, and maybe like some other places up in the Highlands because I just thought that whole area was gorgeous, and would probably do nothing but hiking and outdoor stuff. Um, so then that pretty much wrapped up our UK tour because after Scotland we went back down, took a train back down to London. Did go to the Isle of Wight, which that was a nice little like I don't know 2-day excursion we did before we went back to London and flew back home. Um, But anyways, that wrapped up our what I called the Anarchy in the UK tour, where again we hit up every single country part of the United Kingdom, and every one of those countries, whether it be England, Scotland, Wales, Northern Ireland, would gladly return to and spend more time there to do tons of different stuff. So after the UK tour the following year, so that would have been 2013 was Ireland. No, 2012. No, 2013. Yeah, 2013 was Ireland. 2014 was the UK. 2015 is Scandinavia. So I've been wanting to go to Scandinavia for quite a while because they have, in my opinion, one of the best music scenes. A lot of my favorite bands, kind of like post 80s, a lot of my favorite metal bands are all either from like Sweden, Denmark, Norway, or Finland. So unfortunately, we didn't get to go to Finland, but we did hit up the other 3 Scandinavian countries. So flew into Sweden, Stockholm, which Stockholm is a beautiful city. It's not quite as doesn't have as many like older buildings, and part of that is because I forget what point it was, but a lot of Stockholm, like there's like a big fire that happened. And so a lot of Stockholm burnt down. So there is some older buildings from like I think maybe around like the 1700s and on, but it still definitely feels more modern. Now there are definitely older parts of the city, that still you can see remnants of like the older kind of. Actually, I don't know if there's a whole lot of medieval, or at least I don't recall seeing any like medieval architecture. A lot of it was more like 16, 1700s, if I remember correctly. But Stockholm as a whole, though, is a very beautiful, very clean city. The Swedes are. It's kind of a stereotype, but it's true. They're very, very beautiful people. Just the Nordics in general, like Swedes, Danes, Norwegians, they're all just beautiful, gorgeous human beings. And I don't know what it is that they're doing, but they're doing something right because, again, everyone was just so incredibly attractive, and also everyone was very fluent in English, so communication was not a barrier whatsoever. And one thing that I thought was really interesting too is so all three countries not only do they speak English fluently, but there's not a whole lot of an accent. Danes in particular, which I'll get to that once we get to Denmark. But anyway, so we flew into Stockholm, spent a couple days there, got to see like the Vasa Museum, which the Vasa Museum has a pretty much fully preserved ship. So basically, I forget which Swedish king it was. Gustavus Adolphus, maybe, had this grand ship built. At the time, they were at war with Denmark and I think some other European countries. So basically, he built this grand ship as like this symbol of like his military power and prowess. Didn't get very far in its initial voyage before it sank. But where it sank, really not that far off from Stockholm. Like I think it was like the silt and stuff like that, like preserved it. So when it was like excavated, it was almost like fully intact. Like it hadn't like degraded or anything like that. So basically, the ship is on display at the Vasa Museum. So that was really cool getting to see that. And I remember trying Swedish meatballs because, you know, we're in Sweden. Tried reindeer for the first time in Stockholm, which was really good. It's, if you've ever had venison before, it's very similar. Very lean, not a lot of fat. So yeah, I really liked it. And, you know, that was just a cool thing, getting to try something completely new that I can't have here in the U.S. And so after Stockholm, we went south to Malmö. Didn't spend a whole lot of time there before we took the train into Copenhagen, Denmark. And we only spent 2 days in Copenhagen, but I really enjoyed that city. It's, again, very similar to like Stockholm. It's very clean. People are very friendly. And again, the Danish, I remember a lot of the Danes we talked to, barely an accent at all. Like you could almost mistake them for like an American, whether it be, you know, Americans from the U.S. or Canada. And Copenhagen was just a really cool city, especially like the canals and stuff like that, like kind of the older part of Copenhagen. And even though we only spent 2 days in Copenhagen, didn't go any other parts of Denmark. So if I do go back, which I would, I think I would like to spend more time in other parts of Denmark. Same thing in Sweden, because we were primarily in southern Sweden, didn't go far into the north. So definitely on my to-do list at some point. But I really like Copenhagen. Really cool, safe, very friendly city. So after Copenhagen, we took the train back into Sweden and then went to Gothenburg, which Gothenburg has got a good music scene. It's like two really big Swedish bands that I enjoy are from Gothenburg, like Evergrey and In Flames. And yeah, really cool city. Would have liked to spend more time there. But overall, the time that we did spend there I thought was really cool. And after Gothenburg, we hopped on a train and then headed northwest to Norway. So this is when the trip gets a little bit more interesting, because prior to this, the weather had been pretty great. That's like as soon as we crossed into the Norwegian border, nothing but rain. So, and I remember at one point, so we didn't spend any time in Oslo other than connecting onto one of our like connecting trains, because that's one thing we were debating if we wanted to spend more time in Oslo or not. So we ended up opting out of spending any time in Oslo because we kind of figured it wouldn't be too terribly different from like Stockholm, Copenhagen, or any other major city. So that's not to say that I wouldn't go back, especially if you all have been to Oslo or if you live in Oslo. Feel free to give recommendations and stuff to see there. But we ended up bypassing Oslo and heading to Preikestolen. So took a series of trains there, and the entire time just nothing but rain. And at one point, I forget what city we stopped in, but basically, with all the rain, there was a landslide. So it basically completely covered the train track. So we had to end up stopping, end up taking a bus, which actually was not necessarily. It was an enjoyable overall bus ride because we definitely got to see a little bit more of like the Norwegian countryside. And the lady I was sitting next to on the bus was a Norwegian, so she was kind of giving recommendations of places to travel and stuff to see, and some of the different towns and stuff like that we'd pass. So she'd kind of give me like little tidbits of information about the city, what it was famous for, and all that stuff. But eventually, we finally reach our destination, or at least we find a place to stay the night. Because, again, that whole landslide kind of ruined our plans a little bit, so we had to improvise. And this is definitely something to take into consideration if you've never traveled before. Just, have a plan, but also have a backup plan for when stuff like this happens. So, we stay the night in, I think it was Stavanger? But if it wasn't Stavanger, I remember the following morning we took a ferry to another city, like across the fjord. That might have been Stavanger. But anyways, so from Stavanger we then went to Preikestolen, which is this beautiful. Just look it up. I wish I was a good enough editor to put a picture of Preikestolen in Pulpit Rock, but the lodge we stayed at there, kind of like at the trailhead of Preikestolen and another trail, a less traveled trail, called, or the summit of that trail is called Moslifjellet, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. But this was probably my favorite part of the entire trip. And this was what really ignited my love for hiking, because basically this, really all of Scandinavia, they're very big on outdoorsy stuff. And I think there's even a term in all three languages that basically refers to your weekend hiking adventures or something along those lines, like your weekend just outdoor getaway. And another thing too, actually, kind of before I talk more about Preikestolen, is something I noticed with the Scandinavian culture is, even though the Scandinavians, whether it be Danes, Swedes, Norwegians, they're very friendly, but they initially don't come off as the most warm and welcoming say the Irish do. And that's because they're not big on small talk, and they even have a word in their language, and I forget what it is, that basically means they don't like small talk. So they'll, not to say that they're like the Parisians in Paris, where they completely ignore you or just are assholes. It's just they're usually not the first ones to kind of initiate a conversation, but they will be more than happy to talk to you. Their sense of humor is a little, I don't know, I guess a little on the dry side. Not quite like British dry humor, but it's, I guess, kind of adjacent. I remember the city we stayed at before we went to Preikestolen. We were talking to the guy at the front desk when we were checking into a hotel. He's asked us oh yeah, how you guys enjoy Norway? We're well, it seems like a really nice place, but it's been doing nothing but rain, so we haven't really got to do anything. He's welcome to Norway. So that's kind of their sense of humor, and I appreciate that. That's another cultural difference, kind of a thing that I noticed in the Scandinavian countries. But anyway, so once we get to the lodge, and I forget the name of it, but it's a great base of operations if you love to do outdoorsy stuff. Because basically, right down the road, within walking distance, there's this beautiful lake, which we went kayaking, which I was actually the first time that went kayaking. So that was really cool. And obviously, tons of hiking trails. that part of the trip is definitely what ignited my love for hiking and what kind of made me decide that I wanted to do more hiking like on every trip since. Again, both domestic and international. Part of what made that really nice is the staff at that lodge. So we stayed there, I think, for a grand total of like I think it was 3 or 4 days. And actually, most of the staff were made up of Swedes from Malmö. But I remember one of the guys, Casper, was one of our servers at the lodge. Super cool, super friendly guy. Again, had a nice sense of humor, but he also was the one that told us about this trail to Moslifiulet, because it was after we did the trail up to Pulpit Rock. Yeah, he's kind of asking us like what we thought about the trail, and obviously we really loved it. It's an intense hike, so if you've looked up pictures and you're like, oh yeah, I really got to do that, I definitely would highly recommend just be sure to wear proper footwear and maybe do a bit of like training on the treadmill, or do like stairs, like go up and down stairs to build up like your legs and thighs. Good God, well worth the hike. It wasn't super long. I think it was maybe like 6 miles altogether, like up and down. But it is intense. Like I remember my thighs were killing me the following day, like just super sore. It was kind of uncomfortable to walk, but I remember it was well worth it though. And also Norway is when like at that lodge, I think it was the first time that I had salmon, and the best salmon I've ever had. Could have just dined on nothing but salmon. And I will say though, beer in the Scandinavian countries, in particular Norway, is very expensive. That's maybe one of my only nitpicks about those countries, because I love beer. I love to try different beers of every countries that I've been to. And again, just anywhere I go to, domestic or international, I love trying the local beers. One of my nitpicks is the alcohol there is very expensive. But I do remember trying just about all the beers that they had at that lodge. There's also a really good pear cider that they had. There was a Norwegian pear cider. I can't remember the name of it. And I remember I also tried a Russian beer. I think it's called the Comrade Stout or something like that. But it was an Imperial Stout. It was like 16%. So it was pretty dark, pretty heavy, really good. But even after a full meal and just one of those, I was feeling just ever so slightly lightheaded. That's how potent that beer was. But and the rest of the trip was great. But that's what really made that trip. That was my favorite. I think same thing with my older brother and oldest sister. That was our favorite part of that trip, is because we were staying in one place for several days rather than like basically staying one night here, being on the road again, whether it was like traveling by bus or train or whatever. That is kind of the downside of like traveling, is finding the right middle ground of traveling enough to where you see a lot of stuff, but you still have leisure time to enjoy yourself, whether it be you enjoy yourself by like kayaking, hiking, or just sitting around like the hotel, lodge, whatever you're staying at, and just relaxing. But I think that's what made that part the best, is because not only was that the most fun, because we had all sorts of outdoorsy stuff to do, but we were staying in one spot the entire time. So, and again, we were there for like 3-4 days, so we got to know the staff fairly well, and all of them were like super solid, super nice people, to where like, every night or every day when we go down there for breakfast, lunch, dinner, they wouldn't even bother handing us the menu. Like, we know what you like. We're gonna hand you your beer. We're gonna, the menu. Just tell us what you want, and we'll bring it out to you. So that's what really made that trip. And I do feel like of the 3 Scandinavian countries, Norway is probably the one that I'd be maybe more inclined to go back to. But again, can't stress enough, would go back to any of these countries in a heartbeat. But if I did go back to Sweden, I'd definitely like to spend more time in northern Sweden, like more in the more mountainous area, or up in Lapland. But really, all of Norway is just super mountainous. So, to me, no shortage of like great hiking trails, like the fjords. All that is just gorgeous. So then, after the Scandinavian trip, Didn't travel again internationally until 2018. Yeah, so about 3 year break. Did some domestic traveling, but I can do a separate video on that if you all want. But after that, so 2018, we did a small trip to Belgium and Germany. So flew into Brussels, and Belgium's a really cool country because it's kind of split between like the Flemish Dutch speaking country in the north, and then the Flemish French speaking. The so the Flemish are the Dutch speakers in the north. The Walloons are the French speakers in the south, and then there's a small pocket of German speaking population close to the German border. Um, so, and also Brussels being like the headquarters of the EU, a lot of the people speak multiple different languages because just by default the Belgians are like bi or trilingual. But I'd say on average, probably most of them speak a bare minimum of like 3 to 4 languages. And I remember the first hotel we stayed at. We were kind of waiting for our room to get ready, and I remember the person at the front desk was talking to one of the other people at the front desk, and they were just talking about how, yeah, I think both of them spoke like 5 different languages, and one of the other staff members, they're like, oh yeah, so and so speaks like 8 different languages, and I just thought that was the coolest thing to be able to speak that many different languages. Because I really only can speak French and Spanish to any degree of fluency, and both of those are very rusty because I haven't had to use those since I graduated from high school, which has been many moons ago. Um, and again, it's a really, I enjoyed Brussels, and I remember um, going to a bar that night and trying a flight of Belgian beer because Belgian beer is some of my favorite kinds of beer. And also, Belgium, I think, if I recall correctly, produces the most variety. I don't know if it's quantity, but I think the most variety of beer in the world. And there's one thing, too, that I love about European beer culture is, and this kind of like is all across the board of Europe, not specific to Belgium, is almost every city or every town, village kind of has their beer. That's like their pride and joy, their wine, their whatever it may be. But in particular beer, though, in most countries. And I love that. So I thought that was so cool. And I'll kind of get more into once we get to the German part. But yeah, huge variety of different beers. Because I love beer. One of my favorite things to do when I travel is, again, to try different beers. Like local breweries and, tap houses and stuff like that. But my favorite part of that trip, though, is we went to Bruges, which Bruges is one of the most medieval cities in Belgium and I think also Europe as a whole. Like well-preserved medieval cities. And if you've seen the movie In Bruges, because that's the first time that I'd heard about Bruges or saw any of it, that's what really motivated me to go see that city because it really is like a fairy tale, like they say in the movie. Also, a really good movie, highly recommend it. But yeah, Bruges was just gorgeous, beautiful medieval city. The Belgians were very friendly, and again, can't say enough good things about the beer, but also the chocolate. So I remember we went to a chocolate shop in Bruges, and they had a lot of weird flavored chocolates. Like there was like Cuban cigar, there was like beetroot flavor, and I wish I could remember the name of the chocolate shop. If I can find the name of it, I'll put that in the description below, so that way you can check out because they've got like videos of the different like chocolates you can try. So I went to town. Like I went in there and like I got some normal flavors, like just some regular chocolates because I wanted to try. I wanted to have some good stuff, and then I was just like, all right, I want to try some weird stuff. And actually, one of the weird chocolates that I really enjoyed was a Cuban cigar. That was actually really good. Some of the ones that I didn't like, wasabi, awful. I don't like wasabi in general, but I was like, hey, when am I ever gonna have wasabi flavored chocolate again? So, and I think the lady that worked at the chocolate shop kind of got a kick out of because I picked out a few of the weird flavors and because I got like the you can get different size boxes which come with like different amounts of candies. So I got like the biggest variety that came with like maybe I don't know, 20 different chocolates or something. So I picked out about like maybe 12. Again, maybe like 4 or 5 normal ones, and then the rest were like the weirder ones. And then she was like, okay, you have, 10 more you can pick. And I was just like, surprise me. give me the weird ones. So I think she kind of got a kick, like, okay, I'll give you some of the weird ones. And again, I was kind of surprised at some of the weird ones, how much I enjoyed them. Like, there's one that was like, I think it's bacon flavored, which I guess that one isn't as abnormal. There's one that was like onion flavored or something, or like minced onion. That one wasn't bad. But yeah, there was, and if I can find that, because I remember I recorded a video of me and my siblings trying the different chocolates. If I can find that video, I might actually upload that here on the channel, or I don't know, put on like my vlogging with Jake YouTube or Facebook channel, so that way you all can check it out. Because yeah, a lot of weird flavors, and some of them surprised me at how good they were, and then there were others that were unsurprising at how bad they were, like beetroot, not great. And then I remember we went to Dinant, which was a small town in Wallonia, so the French-speaking part, and I liked Dinant because it was not as touristy as like Bruges or Ghent, Brussels, some of the other major cities and stuff like that. Also, Belgian waffles. Again, if you're gonna go to Belgium, try Belgian waffles. They're delicious. You can try different kinds. So there's like Liège waffles, which that was one of the ones we had, which were delicious. And Liège is one of the cities in Belgium. Passed through it, but didn't spend a lot of time there. We just kind of were in Liège just to hop on a different train. But anyways, so Dinant was really nice because it's a small little town on the river. Can't remember which river it was. But beautiful little town. And I remember the people, again, people were really friendly, but it was probably the only time that during that trip that the locals weren't super fluent on English, which thankfully I knew just enough French to like order food and kind of navigate us through, which was actually kind of part of the fun experience of that with in general with traveling. Like obviously it's better when everyone is fluent in the language you're speaking, which is usually English. But it's I don't know, it's kind of fun too to just try to communicate through like what little words and gestures. Kind of makes it a little bit more fun and interesting. But yeah, Dinant was a beautiful little town. Would definitely recommend that if you do go to Belgium. And so those were definitely the highlights. In particular, Bruges and Dinant. Like Brussels, I thought was fine, but it's kind of like a lot of other major cities where it's. I don't know. I don't remember anything like super special about it that really leaped out at me compared to like Bruges or Dinant. Sent from Brussels. Actually, no. I think it was. Actually, it might have been Brussels. Yeah, it might have been Brussels. We went back to Brussels. Got a rental? No, train. Anyways, don't remember which city it was, but we took a train into Germany, and primarily we stayed in Cologne. So I really liked Cologne. Another one of my favorite cities, in particular, like the older parts of Cologne, very walkable, which that's a big part and why I like certain cities over others. Is if it's very walkable, that's a big plus. If it has like cool architecture, history and stuff like that, those are all added bonuses. But in particular, if it's a walkable city, and Cologne is right there on the Rhine River, and they're very famous for not only Cologne Cathedral, which is definitely worth taking a tour of, and just taking pictures of. It's probably one of the coolest cathedrals that I've been to in Europe. Love the architecture, like especially like those spires and the history of Cologne Cathedral. But Cologne is also really famous for Kolsch beer. And what's interesting about Kolsch is, so I've had Kolsch before here in the U.S., but technically, Kolsch beer, to be considered Kolsch, has to be brewed within, and I really wish I'd looked this up before I started recording, but anyways, So it can only be brewed within like certain amount of feet from Cologne Cathedral. Otherwise, it's not technically Kolsch. It's Kolsch inspired. So even if it's the exact same ingredients, exact same brewing method, um, if it's not brewed within like that certain amount of feet from Cologne Cathedral, it's just a Kolsch inspired beer. So again, that also kind of just shows the beer culture in Europe in how particular they can be. And also, Kolsch is, as far as light beers go, I enjoy it, or in Kolsch inspired beers. Because normally lagers are some of my least favorite kind of beers because there's not a whole lot to them. But Kolsch was really nice. It's a super light beer. You can just knock those back. And one thing that I would recommend, though, um, with if you ever do go to Cologne, so one of their little, I guess, local customs is, so whenever you're drinking Kolsch, is once you finish your beer, you put your coaster on top of your beer glass, and that lets the server know that you're done. Otherwise, they just keep refilling your glass. So, granted, it's not mandatory, but for me, when I do travel, I like to brush up on some of the cultural stuff and customs. That way, because I do feel like the locals do appreciate when you're familiar with like some of their customs. Um, so, so yeah, that's one of the cool little customs I thought was really cool is in Cologne. Once you finish it with your drinks, you put your coaster on top. That way, the server knows, all right, you're done. I'll come over and give you your tab. And they're very efficient too with the delivery method of their Kolsch. So what they do is they'll have like this 3-tiered tray, and just filled with like filled Kolsch glasses. So they'll go around the bar or restaurant wherever you're eating at, and basically, as long as you haven't put your coaster on top of your glass, they write down the tally of like how many Kolsch's you've had, and they'll just like you know take the empty glasses, put them on their 3-tiered tray, put a full glass there, and basically just they do rounds across the bar restaurant and just keep filling you up. And I remember one of the bars we were at, we knocked back probably a good 6 Kolsch. And that was a fun restaurant. I also had horse meat for the first time when I was in that restaurant, and it was really good. A lot darker than I expected, and the main reason why I ordered that is because I've never seen horse on a menu, so I was like, "Give me a horse." And again, Kolsch beer really good, especially for like a lighter beer. Solid. And Cologne, awesome city. And I remember we also went for a hike at the Seven Sister Mountains, which was maybe about 30-40 minute drive outside of Cologne. So really beautiful area up in the mountains, and took like a little boat tour on the River Rhine. And just in general, again, Cologne was a great city, but I really wish we could have spent more time in Germany. Like that's a whole trip that I could easily spend like another like week, 2 weeks in, is just Germany in of itself. And I think if I do go back to Germany, though, I'd probably spend more time in the south of Germany, like more closer, like in the mountains, like Bavaria. Because Bavaria is actually, I think, where most people get that kind of stereotypical Germany of like the Lederhosen and polka music and stuff like that. But that's probably where I'd spend more time if I go back to Germany, is in southern Germany. Like I think Berlin would be cool and some of the other cities, but primarily more southern Germany is probably where I would go back to. And then I remember after that we hopped in a rental car, and within like 2.5, 3 hours we were back in Brussels. Drove on the Autobahn, which that was cool because again that was just a completely new experience where we were in the car, and sometimes like on the dashboard it would show what the speed limit was for like that part of the road. So obviously the Autobahn isn't completely like, free flowing, just go as fast as you want. There are certain sections obviously like where there is a speed limit. It's still fast. But yeah, I think the fastest we went was maybe a little over 100 miles, and there were still people just zooming past us. So that was a little intimidating because as cool as it was to be able to go that fast for the first time, like for any of us, it's also like, ooh, Going this fast is a little nerve-wracking because if anything goes wrong, we probably don't have quick enough time to react. We're just gonna die, I guess. and also, the Germans are sort of similar to the Scandinavians in the sense that, like, or sort of similar sensibilities where they're not as big on small talk. Um, but once you do kind of like talk to them more, they'll open up and become more, I guess, more just more open. Because again, it's not that they're not friendly or warm and welcoming. They're just not as again. You kind of got to like uh, talk to them a little bit more to open them up before they're more talkative. But one of my favorite parts though with that trip is so the first. Actually, no, I think it's the second restaurant we ate at in Cologne. So we walk in there, we sit down, and my oldest sister, she asked, like, what the Wi-Fi password was. And our server just says, no, no Wi-Fi, just beer. Love that. Because personally, whenever I'm traveling, or just in general, whenever I'm out with friends and family, I don't like to be on my phone. I want to be, like, engaged with the conversation. And so I love that. Not every restaurant or bar needs to have Wi-Fi. Sometimes it's just nice to disconnect and sit there, talk with whoever you're with, and enjoy beer or enjoy your meal, and just again disconnect from social media and technology and connect with whoever you're with. I guess is the message of what I'm trying to convey here, and what I liked about that particular restaurant. And I wish I could remember the name of it. But yeah, so would definitely recommend going to Cologne if you ever go to Germany. Great city. Kolsch beer, fantastic. I love that. Just again, that beer culture about Cologne, and another reason why I would love to go back to Germany is again big beer culture there. Would love to also attend an Oktoberfest. So then after that trip, winding down to the final country. So that trip was 2018. And then I didn't travel again international until more recently in 2023 when I went to New Zealand. So, if you were not aware of this, I'm a huge fan of Middle Earth and Tolkien and Lord of the Rings. So that was the main reason why New Zealand has been so high on my list of countries to travel to for well over a decade. And it doesn't disappoint in any regard. It was another one of those trips that was incredibly magical. I love the New Zealanders. They're so friendly and they're just so relaxed. So a little bit of background. So when we arrived in Auckland, um, great weather, and so it's like a 16-hour flight. So we're super tired, but we're also really excited. So as we're in our rental car driving to our destination, we're flipping through the radio, and so at one point we stumble across like the Weather Channel, and they're talking about like how there's supposed to be like a cyclone of the century, and so of course we're in the car and we're like, God damn it, are you kidding us? As soon as we fly into basically the bottom of the world, there's talks of like the cyclone of the century. So like the radio's just really hyping this up of like, oh, cyclone of the century, it's gonna be awful. Oh my god. So we're a little concerned. And so then we start to talk to like some of the locals. We're like, hey, so this cyclone of the century, is this something we should be worried about? And I don't know if maybe this is just like cyclones are just a regular occurrence for New Zealanders, even if they're supposed to be cyclones of the century. But they were just so chill about it. They're just like, oh no, it's fine. It'll just blow right over. Don't worry about it. You'll be fine. And so we're like, oh okay. Well, I mean, you all live here. You probably know more about this stuff than we do. so, um, so really, we didn't experience the effects of the cyclone until as we were leaving the North Island. But anyway, so on the North Island though, so we spend that first night in Auckland, and we went hiking towards this beach. I can't remember what it was, the name of the beach, but it was about like a 45 minute drive outside of Auckland, where we went on this trail. Because after being stuck on a plane for like 16 hours, we needed some exercise, and New Zealand just in general is like an outdoor person's paradise. So after a nice hike, we go get some lunch, and then our original plan was to go to the hotel because our hotel we weren't able to check in until like later in the afternoon. So that is another reason why we went hiking, is to just kill some time until we could go to our hotel. So, anyways, the original plan was to go back to our hotel, drop off our stuff, rest for a little bit, and then go out for drinks and just enjoy the evening. We were all passed out by like 6 p.m. And slept so great though. Was so tired because I did not sleep nearly as well as I would have liked to on that 16-hour flight. Um, but yeah, after that though, most of the North Island we spent doing like Hobbiton, which loved getting to visit the Shire. One of my favorite parts of Middle Earth in both the books and the movies is the Shire. Great tour, would highly recommend it. Um, just fantastic tour, and that part of the North Island, or really any part of New Zealand's beautiful. That was great, and then I remember towards the I think after the Hobbiton, we went to Tongariro National Park, and our original plan was we were going to go to Mount Nagrohe. I'm sure I butchered that, but basically the mountain they use for Mount Doom. Um, so you're originally going to go hike around that area, but because the cyclone was starting to go like kind of come gradually more inland, weather did not permit. We still got to hike some great trails in Tongariro National Park. And got to see like this beautiful waterfall. Can't remember the name of it, but so even though the cyclone kind of affected our trip a little bit, we still got to enjoy ourselves. And then we stayed at this beautiful Verbo house right on the shores of Lake Taupo, which Lake Taupo is, I forget how big it is like circumference wise, but it's basically like this ancient like caldera. It's like this volcano that exploded and it's been extinct for a long time. That it's so big though that you could almost mistake it for like the sea because of like how big the waves are and just you can't see across the other side. And I remember the house we stayed at um, had like this little walking trail that led down to the lake. So I remember when because at this point it was raining like nonstop all day because the cyclone was coming further inland. So it kind of disrupted some of our plans that following day, where we didn't get to do a whole lot of hiking. So we kind of just improvised and went to like the glowworm caves, which actually was really cool. Because apparently, like the only parts that have like those like glowworms is I think like New Zealand. I want to say Australia, and then randomly like somewhere in the U.S. it's like Mississippi or Alabama have these glowworms. But so it's basically raining nonstop, and but again, thankfully we still enjoyed ourselves, and there was like a shop like 5 minutes down the road where we kind of just since we couldn't go out, we just stopped there, got like some snacks and some. I remember I grabbed a couple bottles of New Zealand wine. I think the Squawking Magpie was one of them, which I enjoyed, and then I can't remember the other one. But I enjoyed both the wines, and I'm not a huge wine drinker. But I remember when the rain did finally let up, I went down that walking trail and just kind of went down to the beachhead of Lake Taupo, and just beautiful. Loved it. And I had to, like, there was no one else, like, on the beach. Only one other person on the trail is a local woman, and was kind of talking to her. Super nice, just like all the other New Zealanders, just ridiculously friendly. Um, but then I remember after that is when we flew to the South Island. So after that, we thankfully were able to make it to the South Island because we were very, very worried that our flights would get canceled because of this whole cyclone situation. But thankfully, our flight didn't get canceled. We made it to the South Island and stayed the night in this little town called Twizel, which is close to where, in the Lord of the Rings movies, the scenes where the Battle of Pelennor Fields took place, and a few other scenes I can't recall at the top of my head. But nice, really nice little town, and it's only about like a 45-minute drive from Hooker Valley National Park, which is beautiful. Like Mount Cook is gorgeous, especially so that whole area. It's like this valley carved out by glaciers, and you can even still see. So we were there in February, which New Zealand's in the southern hemisphere, so for them that's their summer, and so this is like the peak summer season for them, and there's still like snow-capped mountains. And I remember even when we were hiking through that valley, could occasionally hear like rumblings off in the distance, and that was like small little avalanches happening up in the mountains. So it was really cool, and you could even see like signs posted in the park, like stating about like the dangers of avalanches. So probably should have been more nervous than I was seeing all those signs, but I actually thought that was really cool. Um, and again, like just the whole area, that whole park was just gorgeous. We hiked Sealy Tarns, which that's another like super super intense hike. It's well worth it because it's just steep inclines. So get ready for a good like leg day. I would say it's about as intense, maybe a little bit more so than when we hiked to Prekestolen. Because again, that is almost like that's pretty much all nothing but the incline. Um, but thankfully, I'd kind of like trained a little bit because I was prepared for like um, some of the hikes because I had kind of brushed up on like the intensity of some of those hikes. So I had done a lot of leg stuff. I was kind of prepared, so thankfully wasn't super sore the following day. But all that to say, um, if you do Sealy Tarns or a lot of the trails in that park, maybe again do a little bit of training or be prepared to be super sore the following day. But anyways, that whole park was beautiful, um, especially when the clouds were clear and you had a nice view of Mount Cook. It to me it looked like Erebor from the Hobbit movies, the Lonely Mountain. So that's what I named it. That first day when we had this beautiful clear view of Mount Cook, and then after that, we went primarily the rest of our time in the South Island was in Queenstown, which Queenstown was fantastic. One of the things that I love so much about Queenstown is it's a very walkable city. So like especially the place where we stayed at, we were maybe like a 10-minute walk from like the main downtown area where they had all the restaurants, bars, and I forget the name of the lake that it's like on the shores of, but basically no shortage of outdoorsy stuff to do. We did like a bike and wine tour where you rent a bike and you just bike to as many wineries in the area as you can. There's a few breweries too, but remember we only ended up doing I think 3 wineries and 1 brewery before we headed back. But that in and of itself was great. And honestly, I think we could have gone further, but none of us had rode a bike in a very long time, and I'd forgotten how uncomfortable bike seats are. Because physically, I could have made it to like some of the other wineries, but our asses were so sore from sitting on those bikes for so long. So we were like just cut our losses. We're like, all right, now let's call it a day. So I would gladly go back to Queenstown, do more of those winery tours, and just probably spend more time. Again, if I went back to the South Island, probably spend more time in Queenstown because it's a beautiful city. It's a good location where again you have pretty much any outdoors thing you wanted to do, you can do it there. And like plenty of places to like rent your equipment or rent the bikes for bike tours or whatever you want to do. And again, like Queenstown, it's a resort town, no shortage of restaurants and bars and cafes, and just everything you can think of basically for the most part is there. So and that's pretty much where we spent the last leg of our trip in New Zealand before we went back to the North. Flew back to the North Island before flying back home. But New Zealand is definitely one of my favorite places I've ever been. the first non-European country that I've been to, because I would like to travel to other countries outside of Europe as well. But yeah, I could definitely go on and on about a lot of these different countries. I mean, this video is already going over an hour and a half, so I'm going to try and wrap this up here. But yeah, so that wraps up the 16 countries that I've been to, and unfortunately I don't think I'll be doing any international trips this year. I still plan on doing some domestic trips this year, and I think I stated in a previous video, I'm kind of debating like if I want to like include that type of content, like some of my vlogs and stuff like that on the channel, or maybe start a separate channel about my vlogs. But anywho, definitely one of my goals is to do more traveling in general, though, going forward, not just for this year, but just in general, do more traveling, both domestic and international, because that's one of my all-time favorite things to do. So thank you all for checking out this video. It's completely different from what I usually do, but something that I wanted to share with you all and hopefully inspire you all who haven't traveled or traveled a whole lot to get out there more often and go see new things. But let me know what you thought about the video. Have you been to any of these countries? If you have, what are your thoughts? Or give me recommendations on countries that I should visit and some of the highlights of places that I should go visit. And again, keep in mind, I prefer the more off-the-beaten-path stuff whenever I travel. So, but again, give me the cool touristy stuff too. I'm all for checking that stuff out. But yeah, that wraps up this video. Hopefully you'll have enjoyed. And until next time, everyone, cheers.